Boom. Let's do
Boom.
this.
Okay.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday to James.
Thank you.
My greatest professor and mentor, Joel Stark, who passed away in the last year, not COVID related. Always loved to say he was someone who retired but never left the office, continued to dedicate his life to the work that he loved and the people that he loved, his colleagues, and the people who he dedicated his whole career to, young people with all sorts of learning differences. And he always used to say, every day is a birthday. If you wake up, it's a gift, so we can all celebrate our birthday. But today, our special guest, James, it is truly his birthday. And for those that know James, he's one of the most recognized names, voices. His words resonate around the country and around the world. So I'll just give a little intro, but we're going to talk about growing up and adulting and why he chose to do this on his birthday. But I'll read his bio, and this is going to be a great episode, and I'm really looking forward to connecting with my man James from New Orleans. So James is from New Orleans. He's a Saints fan, which is an emotional thing because Drew Brees just retired after a really awesome career. We're not going to focus on that because that's a downer, but it's a birthday, so we're going to stay up. He's a Survivor superfan, an HLA technologist, a writer, a person who stutters from the New Orleans area. James is the author of Dear World, I Stutter, a series of open letters from a person who stutters. The book is epic, and it's always at the top of the table and often sold out at the conferences, but you can find it on Amazon. So again, the book, Dear World, I Stutter. The work's been published, his work has been published on The Mighty. He's also a blogger with the Stuttering Foundation, with Stamma, with Yahoo and MSN. And if that wasn't enough, James also appeared on several podcasts, and that's good preparation for this one, but this is not the biggest stage. The biggest stage, I think it's fair to say, that he stood on was a TEDx conference in 2019. We'll talk about that. He also serves as the chapter leader for the New Orleans chapter for the National Stuttering Association. And I just want to read something that James wrote, which I thought was great, and a fantastic intro from his TEDx talk. And then I'll let James tell us why he's here on his birthday. But James wrote about his TEDx talk. I stepped on the dot, and I chose this specifically because it relates to birthdays and reflecting on the past year and where we've been and where we are and where we're going. But most importantly, sometimes we don't feel we've changed a whole lot when we look at the last week, look at the last month, look at the last year. But if we look back at ourselves 5 years ago, it's sometimes refreshing to realize we're not the same we were 5 years ago, and you can't watch a pot boil. But when we're feeling like, you know, where am I going? Am I getting traction? It helps to look back with a little bit of perspective, and then it helps us also to look ahead, not what's going to change tomorrow, but where do I want to be a year from now, 5 years from now, just to dream, just get some space of opportunity and abundance. So I'm going to read this, and then James, please take us off. I stepped on the dot at a TEDx talk, took a deep breath, and told myself, this will come out the way it'll come out, and that's okay. Over the next 4.5 minutes, I stuttered big time. But more importantly, I delivered my TEDx talk and gave my audience my message. Once it was done, I went backstage to celebrate what I just did with my fellow speakers and the backstage crew. During this celebration, I was overcome by a wave of emotion, and I had to take a few minutes for myself. I kept thinking of 21-year-old James. James from 5 years ago would have let his stutter hold him back from so much, but giving a TED talk on his bucket, much less giving a TED talk. So just the idea of giving a TED talk. James from 5 years ago would have been mad and embarrassed that he stuttered openly to a group of strangers. James from 5 years ago would not have believed what 26-year-old James accomplished. What a great intro as we welcome James to the Transcending Stuttering podcast. Stepping on the stage on his birthday.
Thank you for having me.
It's an honor.
So I picked my birthday because aren't you supposed to do what you love on your birthday? And like talking about stuttering is one of the things that I love to do, which is ironic. Consider me from 8-9 years ago would never do this, did not want to talk about stuttering, did not want to acknowledge the fact that he was a person that stuttered. And now today at like 28, this is something that I love to do. And yes, for those that are watching, I know I look like I'm 17, but I promise you I'm 28 years old.
It's funny how at certain points in your life you wish to look older and you get carded too often. And then at a certain point you turn a corner and you're like, I wish I looked younger.
Yeah.
So I won't reveal my age, but James, you look great. And you
Thank
should
you.
always have that young spirit and spunk and awesomeness.
So I've been told.
Totally. So like, what do people not know about you? That intro really touched on different parts of your, what TV series you love, what you have accomplished, and what teams you root for. But what's something that you'd wish people to know that maybe wasn't in the bio?
Ooh, good question. So I'm the oldest of two. The oldest of two. I've a younger sister, and I'm the only person in my family that stutters. Fun fact. And an HLA technologist, for those that don't know, is I basically see if a potential organ donor and a potential organ recipient are compatible. And I've been doing that for 3 years next week.
Wow. Wow. So organs like kidneys, things like that?
Kidneys, hearts, lungs, livers, all of them.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That's incredible. Are you involved in the transport as well, or just the match, the feasibility of the match?
Just the testing portion of it.
Awesome. That's a fascinating thing.
Yeah. One of 3 labs in the state of Louisiana that does that. And there's only, I think, 200 labs, roughly 200 labs in the country that do that type of testing.
Wow. So you picked your birthday to be on, but I can't help but notice over your left shoulder, I'm seeing The Way We Talk.
Yes.
A poster from Mike Turner's film. And Mike Turner was my guest last week. And Mike's out in Oregon. I'm like clicking off my 50 states slowly but surely. So we got Louisiana, we got Oregon, we got Nebraska a few weeks ago with Dr. Naomi. So Mike's awesome. And you and I connected. We'll get to your right shoulder in a minute.
Okay.
But your left shoulder, The Way We Talk, is a film by Michael Turner. Unbelievable film documentary. And you and I connected in the chat on the Zoom screening of that with the Stuttering Scholarship Alliance, hosted by none other than Nate Malapeti. And I was very moved by the exchange, and I think everyone was, and they shared a short clip of that. Do you want to share what that movie meant to you?
Yes. So I first saw it in April of 2017. I was living in Baton Rouge at the time, and I saw that the movie was being screened. So I figured, let me go see it. I had heard a bunch of good things about the movie, so I went to go see it. And at the time, I only been going to stuttering support group meetings for about a year and a half at the time, and was like coming around to the idea of being okay about myself and being okay with talking about it. And towards the end of the film, one of the people in the documentary, I forget the man's name. It's not Michael. It's one of his friends. But he says, to wish away this part of myself would be like saying, I don't like who I am. I like who I am. And that struck a chord with me, because a question I sometimes get whenever I talk to people about stuttering is, would you take a magic pill to get rid of your stutter? And my answer has changed over the past 6, 7, 8 years. My original answer was I don't know, and that's not a cop out, to 80% of the time I would not take it, to now where if you offer me the pill 100 times, I'm saying no, 98 times out of 100. Because yes, I do have those rare days when I want nothing to do this, and I would gladly take that pill. But those days are few and far between. And I think for me, having been okay with it and accept it and embrace this part of myself, I've learned so much about myself and about life. I've met so many amazing people. I've had so many amazing experiences because of the fact that I've made a decision, this daily and at times hourly decision, to embrace this part of myself. And I think if I get rid of it, I wouldn't have all those life lessons and experiences. But it would also like saying, I don't like who I am, because this is a part of myself that has made me and shaped me and transformed me into like the person I am today at 28. And without it, I don't think I would be me. And I like who I am. I like to think I'm a good person, and that the fact that I stutter has helped shape that. And without this part of me, I don't know where I would be. I wouldn't have the experiences I had. I wouldn't be talking to you. I don't think I would be as empathetic as I am. I wouldn't be as good as a listener as I am if I didn't have a stutter, if I didn't stutter. And it's wild to imagine a world where I didn't, why I wouldn't stutter full time. But as wild as it is, I can imagine that. And I know what that's like, because for a short period of time in high school, I didn't consider myself a person who stuttered. I stuttered like once or twice during my high school career from about age of like 13 to 18, but I thought stuttering I was done with. And then my stutter returned when I was a senior in high school 10 years ago, and it hasn't left since. And I've accepted the fact that this is a part of me, and that's okay. And make the best of it.
Totally. I think what's so interesting is, number one, looking at how things are kind of fluid and evolve. So, one doesn't arrive at a destination.
Right.
We consistently are meandering on a journey, and sometimes we lean a little bit to the left of the road, sometimes a little bit to the right of the road. It's not black or white. It's not binary. And I loved how you said the answer has changed over time. And even in this very moment, talking about in this very moment, 98 times out of 100, my answer is X. 2 times out of 100, it might be Y. And that allows for the reality that most of our feelings are pretty mixed with most of life. There's very little that's like total, right? I think that's very refreshing. I think the concept that it's just, there's an easy way that people could come to think it's all or nothing, either way. And I like the nuance that you're bringing to that. I don't know if you want to share anything about that.
Yeah, it took me a while to get to that point. Like, as you said, it's an ongoing journey. And my answer has changed because I've grown a lot as a person over the past 6, 7, 8 years. My view on stuttering has grown a lot over that same time frame. And I've matured a lot. And it's realizing that stuttering isn't the worst thing on the planet. It's not like this dragon that needs to be slayed, but rather it's just one of the things that make me uniquely me. And does stuttering suck? Yeah, 24/7, 365. But I choose to see the beauty of stuttering, because if I saw the other negatives of it, then for me, I wouldn't be in a good place. I wouldn't be doing, what I'm doing. Like, I would let my stutter control me instead of me controlling it.
That is so powerful. What were the influential pieces or people or experiences? So watching the film in 2017 sounds like that was a certain touchstone moment.
Yeah. That was
what were some other people or experiences that really turned pages for you or were memorable, impressionable?
Right. So there's a few big ones that I think of. First one was returning to speech therapy when I was a junior in college at the age of 20, which was not on my list of things to do during my college career. And it took some convincing, from my family before I sent the email. And when I sent the email, I was a spring semester of college, a spring semester of my sophomore year. And I sent an email hoping that they could say, there's nothing that we could do, sorry. But I got the answer that I needed and not the answer that I wanted, just you could begin speech therapy in the fall. So, 20 years old, fall of 2013, started speech therapy, had to swallow a massive amount of pride in order to do that. Because for my first 2 years of college, I had put on this mask, like being okay with the fact that I stuttered. When in reality, the face behind the mask wasn't okay with it and was afraid of like what would happen if his friends, found out that he was in speech therapy and that he wasn't okay with himself and all these negative things. Spoiler alert, my friends didn't care then, they don't care now that I stuttered or that I went to speech therapy. It's a non-issue, as it should be, but I wasn't in that place then. At 20, I was so convinced that stuttering is like this terrible thing, and I was embarrassed by it. And if people, found out about it, then the world would end. They found out I was in speech therapy, like the world would end. because like everyone knew I stuttered. I didn't really hide it, but I never talked about it. So I was going to speech therapy when I was 20, and like, yeah, I learned and relearned a bunch of different techniques to reduce my stutter. But more importantly, it was the first time that I talked about stuttering with someone. It was like I was able to just talk to my speech therapist about my fears for the future, my concerns, my self-doubt, and all of the negative things that we associate with stuttering. Excuse me. And over the course of the next 2 years, I developed this sense of acceptance within myself that, okay, maybe stuttering isn't the worst thing on the planet. Started to become okay with this notion that there's worse things in life than taking a few extra seconds to say your name. So that was like a big moment for me. My next moment, it's 2 in 1, was in October of 2015. I went to my first NSA meeting. It was the Baton Rouge chapter. And I had heard about the NSA in speech therapy about 2 years prior. But at the time, I wasn't ready to walk into a room of people who stutter and say, hey, my name is James, I stutter, let's talk about it. Was not there yet. So October of 2015, I looked at the NSA to see this whole acceptance thing was real, because I was internally okay with it, but externally I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I was ready to share that with others. Walked through those doors, and I found people that got it. I met, for the first time in 22 years, I met people that got it and that knew what was going on and that can say, yeah, I get it. This is how like I deal with this. And just having that sense of community was a big game changer. And it's been that way for 5.5 years now, of being with people that get it, that know, and that can challenge me on my beliefs on stuttering and try to make me think and make me think of things differently in regards to stuttering. So being a part of that community has been a massive thing for me. And then also that same meeting, I met the chapter leader, Jeff Colson, who is a professor at LSU. And he's sort of become like a mentor-ish-esque figure to me over the past 5.5 years, because he was the first person that I saw that he stutters, but he still is like married with kids and has a good job. And he has like all those things that I want. And he stutters. And he has all those things I want. And like, yes, I can do that. And at 22, that was like a big deal to me. And he's someone that I can go to and just be like, hey, like this sucks, or like I have this situation, I don't know how to best handle it. What's your perspective? So I think those would be my 3 big, game changers to get to where I'm at today.
It's amazing. As I think about those 3 things, I think about there are moments that are like openings of doors, sliding doors. There are then communities that help us kind of carry through long term, because those moments are fleeting. There are those inspirational moments, those moments of fireworks, but it's hard to capture them and carry them, between 4th of July and 4th of July. And hopefully this 4th of July will be a much, bigger celebration.
Fingers crossed, hopefully.
Hopefully. But between the fireworks, how do we keep it alive? How do we keep the light? How do we keep the sparks? And I think community is the piece that's so important there. And then having those relationships with people who can be like peer-to-peer or peer-to-mentor. And sometimes it's with a family member, sometimes it's with someone whose title is assumed to be someone who would be a mentor. And then sometimes you find mentors in the weirdest of places. They come from different walks of life. There are different stages of life. But it's so important, I think, to have breakthrough moments and experiences that are outside your norm. That's where you're going to grow. And then having a community that continues to support that growth and keep it going, and having that consistent ability to tap into community to keep it fresh and alive inside of you, because otherwise you just kind of fall back to the old familiar stuff.
Right.
And then finding that person that can be a mentor or a peer to kind of really bounce things off of and have that give and take and then reciprocate back with. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, but those are my big 3 game changers.
Where did the book start? When did you decide you were writing a book? Were you over your right shoulder is an amazing set of things. You could tell us about all of them, but I see one of them is your best-selling book. And maybe you could tell us about Dear World, I Stutter, the genesis of it, when you thought it was going to be a book, how it started, and where it's taken you.
For sure. So writing a book was never on my bucket list of things to do. And it came out of what I like to call my quarter life crisis. So I was living in Baton Rouge at the time, was one step below my dream job at my dream company. And I used the word dream in quotes because that was my dream when I was 22, 23, and was miserable there. After like a year and a half, I knew I needed something else, but I didn't know what that something else was. So this was February of 2017. I was told I would not be moving up, and they're like, yeah, that was basically it. I was like, okay, cool. Now what? Because this was my degree. This is what I've been wanting to do since I was in high school, and I was told it's not going to happen for you. So that was crushing. So February 2017, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's my next step? Like, where do I go from here? Because what I want to do for so long, I can't do. Now what? So around this time, I started to guest lecture at LSU for Dr. Colson's class, and I had also done an NSA open house, panel discussion to the community. And through those two experiences, I realized that I like to talk about stuttering, which is weird because for so long, stuttering was the elephant in the room that everyone chose to ignore, myself included. But now I wanted to acknowledge that elephant and talk about the elephant and describe the elephant and just show the elephant off to everyone. So I did those two things, realized I liked to talk about stuttering, and I figured, let me just get my story out there and see what happens. Maybe this could lead somewhere. Maybe it doesn't, but at least I could say I tried, as opposed to being 50 years old and saying, well, what if? So
what did you think when you did all that? Like, leaning into that, you say it in hindsight as if no big deal. Mm-hmm. But for anyone leaning into that at the time, you were stepping into the unknown, you were stepping into the abyss, you were stepping exactly into the thing that for so long was something you ran away from or avoided. I'm wondering, in hindsight, it worked out. It worked out marvelously well.
It worked out pretty well.
But for any home run, I often like to, business leaders, all books on personal growth talk about this. To hit a home run or a grand slam, you got to strike out a couple of times. You got to swing hard, and you're going to strike out more often than you're going to connect. What was the downside, or what would have been the greatest risk looking back? Like, maybe you didn't even think about it then, but what was the potential risk or downside of what you did? And obviously we see some of the upsides, but you could kind of shed light on even more of some of the latent benefits that came out of that, and then how we get to the book.
Right. So when I first started to write, I wrote my journal story, got it picked up by the Mighty, and I figured, okay, let's just see what happens. Got some good feedback. Realized I like to talk about stuttering, and that a lot of times I wanted to talk about could be in the form of an open letter. So spring and summer of 2017, I was writing a lot just to get my story out there, get my name out there, and see what would happen. Was getting good feedback. And during all that time, this idea of a book, maybe I could make this a book at some point, like 5-10 years, down the line, wasn't something I really considered. But I still kept, writing just to get my name out there, just to have myself known within like the writing world and the stuttering world, and just see where this would take me. But I also kept a bunch of stuff that I wanted to not publish, just in case I ever did write this book. So that was a lot of like summer of 17 was just writing. And October of 2017, I left my job with no real backup plan. Moved back in with my parents at 24 with no real job. Like, didn't have a job, didn't know what I was doing with my life, but my parents were great. They moved back in, and I decided, why not? I figured worst case scenario is that I write this book, no one buys it, but I could say I did it, and it's a fun fact about myself that I could bring up. Best case scenario, I can make a career off of this, go on the Kelly Clarkson show and whatever. So I figured, okay, why not? So I spent the next like 6 weeks writing, editing, and formatting, writing, editing, formatting, writing, editing, formatting, and I self-published December 4th of 2017. But yeah, there are some downsides. There are times when I had to really think like, okay, is this how I truly felt, or am I just at 24 projecting onto my younger self or projecting onto others? And then there were a couple letters in there that were hard to write because it was to people that I know personally. I didn't use their names, but and like, how would that impact my friendship or my relationship with that person? So those were some things I had to weigh out, and was publishing those letters worth it? And I ultimately decided that it was, because if my book is going to be as honest and as real and as vulnerable as I claimed it was going to be, those letters, had to be in there. And they understand. Some I still talk to, some I don't, but that's life. And there's other stuff going on. It wasn't just a letter, like other things have happened, and like we just drift over years, because that's what happens sometimes. But that's that's basically it. So it's 25 open letters to people that have been or will be on my journey with stuttering. I write to my younger self, my parents, my speech therapist, the future speech therapist, to my family, to my friends, to my sister, to the waiter who laughed at my stutter, to the person who said I should never apologize for the fact that I stutter, to the first girl to see past my stutter, to the person who said I should never apologize because I stutter, to the person that said they felt sorry for me because I stutter, to my future wife, future self, and future kids, and a couple other ones.
It's a very powerful thing and a very powerful exercise. I encourage everybody to check out the book.
Thank you.
The openness, the honesty, the integrity, the courage is what's so attractive,
Yeah.
There's so many stories, specifically in the dating scene, where people have all kinds of hesitation because of feeling that they don't measure up, feeling like they're not attractive enough, or this thing about them won't be acceptable to others. And often it's more of, can I accept myself? If I can't accept it myself, it makes sense that I'm not going to feel that others can accept it. So it starts with, and we've been talking about this with this framework we've been running with this 4-part framework with Transcending Stuttering. There's self-knowledge, knowing what stuttering and communication is about. There's the self-adjustment. What can I do to make things easier? What can I discover makes things harder? Oh, wow, it's not all like I'm victim to the weather. There are things I can do that actually make a difference. That's helpful, whether I choose to do them or not. Then there's self-acceptance, which is self-love, self-compassion. How do I tolerate myself? How do I love myself? How do I celebrate myself on my birthday and every day?
Right.
And then self-advocacy, like, how do I let the world know this is what's up, this is what it is, this is what it's not, and here's how I want you to relate to me. And knowing what's up is on the table, let's go forward and do great things together. But what I love about it is, with writing letters, and it's one of the exercises that we lean on a lot, I love that James has given us an example, a template, something people can see as an example of all these different letters to one's younger self, which is such a therapeutic thing, but also the letters to heal or to say the words that were unspoken when someone said something that was crushing, when someone said something nasty. And you might never get to see them. You might never get to settle the score, but you can kind of settle the scar, the feeling, the bruise,
All right.
That just came right now, man.
That's good.
I'm with a master wordsmith. You can't settle the score, but you can heal the scar.
That's good.
Okay?
I gotta use that one.
There you go. So it's all yours, and you can anytime. So listen, it happens. Steph is here giving major props to the must read of the book. But I just want to say, for therapists, for teachers, for parents, just as a template, as an example, to see one person's stories and letters, it can also help us formulate our own honest letters to ourselves, our own letters to the people that have said things to us, etc. So I just think that the act of writing letters, and then the idea of writing letters to your future self, it opens up a world of imagination, of possibility with people who may no longer be in the world, people who are not yet in the world, like you talked about, letters to your future children. Wow. And it allows us to kind of just reflect and unleash our truest, right? Our truest self, our strongest self. And in other moments, when everything's hitting the fan, when we're not in our best state, we can look at what did we write when we were in our best state? What did we write when we were expressing our ideals? And we can use that as a navigational north instead of kind of fumbling our way through in low states and confusing states. It's letter writing is so powerful, but the courage to share it, wow. But you don't need to share it first. I tell people all the time in the office, they don't want to write that letter to the teacher. I said, okay, we're not going to give it to the teacher. We're not going to give it to your teacher. Just write the letter that you're never going to give. And often they'll say, okay, you promise you're not going to show it to my parents? I promise. And I do. And the next day, got an email from this young lady. She's like, do you have the letter that I wrote? Because I decided I do want to pass it. But creating space for creative writing is a therapeutic, cathartic, muscle building experience. I just want to use James's example as one that others can lean on, whether you stutter or not, as a way to express your inner self.
Yeah, exactly. Because since I started, writing, I've discovered like the joy and the beauty of writing. Because beforehand, I would only write for academic reasons. But since I've started to write, I find myself writing like a lot more, and I find it so cathartic for me. There are a bunch of things that I've written that will never see the light of day. To go to your point, and for the most part, they're not stuttering related. It's just, oh, I had this really bad day, or I'm stressed about this, and this, or this belief that I've held for so long. I'm not questioning it. I don't know what's the best way to deal with it, or like I've held this belief for so long, but now I'm questioning it. Like, what do I do with it? And I find just writing has been so beneficial for me. There are times when as I'm writing, something will come out. I'm like, oh, that's how I really feel about it. Didn't know that. And I'm at my most honest and vulnerable, with myself and with others, when writing.
So we're only at the halfway mark, but this is already like a meal and a half. That's what my dad would say. It's so rich, so awesome. It's like very fine chocolate sitting here and talking with you, James, on your birthday, no less.
Yeah.
If you're enjoying the conversation and you're watching us, drop your comments, your questions. We'll try to weave it in. If you like this conversation, let us know. Give a like. Certainly you can message James, you can message me. And if you're listening to the podcast, share it with others as well, because your subscriptions, your likes help James's story go further and reach more people. There are people that their lives can be changed, or new possibilities can be opened by hearing just one other story. And there's no one story, but it's specifically through the multiplicity of stories, which is my favorite TED Talk. The single story, or the myth of the single story. Really, truth is not in any one story. It's in the way we kind of see things from many different dimensions, many different directions. I just want to share, I listened to a podcast this week. How I got to this podcast is another whole story in and of itself, which I won't share, but it comes from a guy. It came from an email from a person who runs an online course called The Rite of Passage, as in writing, WRITE. And in his email, he was referencing the best podcast he heard in the past year. Guess what? It wasn't Transcending Stuttering. It was Tim Ferriss interviewing Jerry Seinfeld and talking about the practice of writing and the habit and the discipline and the process that Jerry Seinfeld has put into place to kind of keep fresh and keep productive and keep at the top of his game for 5 decades. I recommend it to everyone, but I think James has already revealed that he has a lot in common with Jerry Seinfeld.
Interesting.
So just the act of writing, it's as much as weightlifting. It's a discipline and it's a practice. And from a neuroscience point of view, I think it's fascinating for people who stutter and for everybody to recognize that it's much easier to talk in a neuroscience sense than it is to write. Meaning thoughts come, they're translated into keywords, they're given shape and form in sentences, and the process is rather quick. In fact, it's blazing fast from the brain, and it goes down to the motor system, and you get speech motor words and sounds and so on. And obviously people have different ways of producing, and sometimes they have different hiccups in the process. But writing is a whole nother beast, because it slows everything down. From the thought, your fingers can never blaze as fast as your tongue and your teeth and your vocal folds could ever move. So it slows things down. It's a more refined and a more deliberate form of communication. And in another way, it's also a much more liberating and free kind of way, because there isn't that time pressure. And there isn't that listener kind of hanging on the cadence of whatever feels like the cadence of the moment. So there's something very sophisticated, very rich, sometimes challenging for young kids in school who can't slow down and can't do that planning. And when they're holding this word on the pen, they can't think back what was the previous word or what's the next paragraph. So like planning a 5-paragraph essay, there's a reason that's not easy. Human beings, we're not wired to be the best writers, let's say. We're much better with what's like right in front of us. So writing is an exercise, it's an art. And I think it's interesting, James, maybe just to talk about, like, for you, the relationship between the spoken word, and you've done that on the TEDx stage, and then the art of the written word, which you've done in all these incredible places like the Mighty, the Stuttering Foundation blog, your book. How do you relate to written expression and spoken word?
So I am more reserved and introverted at my core. So like public speaking and talking, I just kind of say what I need to say and keep it moving. Whereas with writing, I'll go there, I'll be more honest with myself, I'll be more vulnerable, and I'll explore different ideas in an unfiltered manner, because my audience is just me, and it'll never see the light of day. Whereas with the spoken word, depending on my audience, I may need to filter myself. Whereas with writing, I can just say, what I want and like how I want to say it, without having to worry about like societal norms and what's my audience looking like, and all these other things that we have to take into account when we speak.
I love it. And I think, just again, broadening the topic, the idea of transcending stuttering is that we all have so much to learn and to grow through stuttering, but it doesn't stop here. It doesn't stop with stuttering or stop with one person here like James. So something I find fascinating, because I work with a lot of young people with all kinds of differences, some people have trouble reading. I'll be, subject number one. At some point in school, I realized it was taking me a long time to read a page, especially fiction. And I asked one of my high school friends, I'm like, how long did it take you to read that page? And they said about 1 minute. And I said, oh, okay, something's up, because it took me like 3 minutes. By the time I got to the end, I couldn't remember what was at the beginning of the page. So I have borderline dyslexia. And I think it's fascinating. I worked at a school called the Summit School. It was one of the most impactful experiences in my career, in my life in Queens, with kids with all kinds of different abilities. And these were kids that had incredible intelligence in one area and incredible things didn't come easy in other areas. So you could have mathematical genius, but socially not the smoothest operators. Gotcha. Or you could have social smarts, but when it came to book smarts, not so easy. So there was a teacher there, Tina, I'll never forget, I'm blanking on her last name, but she taught me something so powerful. She said, you can read with your ears. And she talked about, for kids that have difficulty with the written word on the page, let them listen to audiobooks. Yeah. You'll get exposed to literature, you'll get exposed to language, you'll get exposed to all the great stuff that you can through your eyes. It's just a different channel. And I often talk about this, and it relates back to people who stutter and kids who stutter, and the idea of writing and speaking. You have one brain, and you have a language system in the brain. There are two sorts of output. One kind of output is through the spoken word. Another sort of output would be through the hand, through the pen, through typing, through the written expression. You have two sources of input of language. You can take it in through the ears and listen to someone, take it in through the eyes, through the written word. We need to think about these four modalities and leverage them, especially with people that have a challenge in one channel, to think about, let's not take everybody and make them awesome at that channel that's most difficult. Let's make sure to leverage all the different channels at our disposal. And by doing so, the person comes off for the better, because they become more multi-talented, multi-sensory, multi-able. And often when you strengthen one channel, you get benefits in the same channel that you thought you wanted to work on in the first place. So I think, for example, someone who stutters, working on creating a voice through written expression might seem counterintuitive. Wait a second, we're here to help them speak well. Yeah, well, that's exactly what's not coming easily right now. What if we could go through this other channel and learn so much about their inner world and help them express so much of their inner self through this other channel? And guess what? As you said, when you take the lid off of that, all kinds of things open up, all kinds of muscles emerge inside of you, and all kinds of fears start to melt away. So I just think let's get creative about thinking about different channels. That's number one. So kids with dyslexia can read with their ears. People who stutter can express themselves through the written word. That's not to say all the time, but that is to say to embrace different sorts of expression. Dance,
Right.
music, mathematics, cartooning, drawing. I'm thinking of Danielle Rossi. I'm thinking of Shane Garcia, who was with me a couple weeks ago with dance. So we have to recognize wildlife, photography. My son is an incredible photographer. Animal life. There's so many ways that we can help people connect and express themselves, which is not to say that you should put all your eggs in one basket, but that we should embrace different modalities. So I'm not saying take kids with learning challenges or speech differences and like go all in on some other modality, but I think leveraging and moving between them can create openness for a person to express themselves and find themselves. I'm not sure where I started with that, but I know why I said it, James, and I think you resonated and understand why I went there. You could just resonate off that if you want.
Yeah, so I definitely agree. And I know for me, like writing is something that I like now, but I don't know if I would have been able to do it as a young kid. Because for me, I always viewed writing as either you write for school, you're writing this report, which okay, do that. Not really much you can go into, but to write fiction and would be for me, it's like to think of different places and different stories and different worlds. And I'm not really creative, so like I wouldn't have been able to do that well. But also as I got older, it would mean exploring my emotions. And before I started like writing, doing the book thing, that's not something I really wanted to explore at all. Like I buried my emotions, which is not healthy. Do not do that. Like do not bury your emotions. First-hand experience, it's not good. But I wasn't ready yet. And now because I write, I do find I'm more open to my emotions and willing and to process them and to share them either through the written word or through the spoken word with whoever. And I think because of that, because I'm more open with my emotions, my relationships are better overall with both family, friends, and coworkers.
Wow. So our good friend Steph Lebsack from Colorado,
yeah,
and a bunch of your friends are here and sending lots of love. Steph had a question. She's asking about what are your current writing habits? Is it still a part of your life, I guess? But she's asking, how often do you write, and like what type of purpose? Is it for personal clarity? Is it for producing content? Is it just kind of a hobby? Do you still kind of put a practice of writing into your life?
Not as much as I want to. It's something I do both ways. If I'm having a really bad day or if I'm stressed out about a lot of things, I just go to my laptop. I have it like running Word document that's been around for 3-4 years now that I always keep open and just like write whatever I'm feeling, whatever the frustration is or the stress or whatever it is. So that's just my way of getting it like out there and seeing the good, bad, and the ugly of the situation, and it helps me process. And if I'm feeling all that again, I can go back to it and just remind myself it's okay, you got this, it'll be okay, it's going to work out. So I write for that part just to clear my head and because it's cathartic. But I also do write to produce content. Like I'm very guilty of starting 5 different articles and then not finishing any of them. I think right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 or 5 different articles that I've started and haven't finished. But yeah, most of the time I write now.
I thought I could compete with you, but I think you might top me.
Yeah, so I write for content, to produce content, just to keep myself out there. And with being a blogger for the Stuttering Foundation and for Stamma, I want to continue that. So I do try to write a few pieces every once in a while. But yeah, I feel I'm more writing for content, less so than for personal growth right now. But I really haven't been able to write as much as I want to, just because I have a bunch of other work commitments going on right now, which are taking up majority of like my free time. So I'm not able to write as much as I want to and to finish up all those articles. But this will be an article because doing a Facebook Live event has always been a bucket list item, just in terms of my growth. Like it's one thing for me to be on a podcast where you can just hear my voice, or if I've done a couple of like YouTube videos, but it's only for a select few people have access to it, so no one can see it. But this is going to be available to like all however many million people are going to be on Facebook and can see like the physical acts of me stuttering and to hear it and to see it. So that's something I've wanted to do for personal growth, but never had the opportunity to or wanted to do it. So this will be an article at some point of like what being on a Facebook Live thing means for me. So just a FYI for you. It's coming soon.
Great. Listen, I didn't intend to have you step onto the red dot, and there's much more time. I don't know if that's more challenging or less, but I'm so happy that you're here and that you're just, you keep pushing your comfort zone. I find that so incredibly inspiring, refreshing, enlivening.
You have to, because there's no growth in your comfort zone and like no comfort in your growth zone. And I think in order to just grow as people, we always need to challenge ourselves and like, have these goals that we want to accomplish. Because if we don't have those goals, then what are we doing?
One of the things that we love to do, and we did it in the cohort with the speech language pathologist with the Transcending Stuttering experience together, I talk about how do you help young people just start to consider that communication is not one and the same as stuttering. You can be a person who stutters and you can communicate beautifully, and you can be a person who speaks fluently and you can be a pretty lousy communicator. And of course you could be on both. You can mix and match that any which way you want. You communicate so beautifully.
Thank you.
And listening to you is like a symphony. It's like a beautiful piece of music. And I know that I can speak for myself. I will have to honor your time, because I think you said I won't say what you're doing, but you're vetting some very high level speaking engagement situations. So we're going to end on the half hour, but I just want to say, James, that I could listen to you all day long. And if it was up to me, we'd stay for all day long. And
I can go for another 20 minutes. I'm good.
Oh, okay, good. Then we'll milk every moment that we got. But I would just say this also, for people at different stages, if it's the right time, I put on a tape of, let's say, the YouTube video that went viral of Parker Mantell giving a commencement speech at Indiana University. And I ask people, what are 3 words that come to mind as you listen to this man give his speech? Or my friend Mo Murnick, who wrote the book, The Gift of Stuttering, which if you Google James's book, Dear World, I Stutter, you're going to find a bunch of other good books. And I think I'm guilty, but we'll be updating in the next day or two. I'm not sure that your book is listed in this collection that we've got growing. It's a dynamic list of books, stuttering books to recommend on our blog, but it will be there. But the point is that when you take people and you put up a video of, let's say, Jack Welch doing an interview on TV, or Parker Mantell, or James Hayden, or Mo Murnick, and you ask someone, what are 3 adjectives that come to mind as you watch this person talk? And often the adjectives that come up are like confident, articulate, intelligent. And often it's refreshing for people who stutter to realize when they look at someone else who's communicating in a strong and very confident manner, the adjectives that come to mind, the top 3, fluency doesn't fall in there. It might be in the top 10, it might be in the top 20. But very often when we look at ourselves in the mirror, all we see are our flaws. So listening to you, James, I think it's so compelling, the way you articulate ideas, feelings, the strength, the conviction, the determination, the courage just oozes, shines through Facebook Live. I'm not even in the same room with you, but I'm feeling it. It's absolutely remarkable. So I just think it's also, use this as a sample. Use James as just a starting point. No one should try to be like anybody else, but to just see, wow, here's someone who has 1,000 things that makes him who he is. One of them is this pretty noticeable stutter. But if you had to say, what's hitting you as you listen to this man speak, I don't know, what are the top 3, top 5 things? I don't know if the stuttering is at the top of the list. And you got comments coming back about people agreeing with this. If you agree, just keep dropping those likes, but people are just popping on that.
Please
Yeah.
do.
So go ahead, James. You got more nuggets you want to drop and wisdom you want to share.
Yeah, so we'll go back to what we talked, what we started off early with TED, which for those that are watching, you see this red X over my right shoulder. That is my plaque, award, whatever you want to call it, for being a speaker at TEDxOchsner 2019. So
if you're watching, you would notice that I do not have a book behind me. I do not have a TEDx plaque behind me. That's because I have not done some of the very courageous and amazing, talented things this guy's accomplished. Hopefully he'll be able to slip me in somewhere.
Hopefully. But yeah, so TED's like a weird story. So I remember it was summer of 2018. My best friend and I were hanging out, and I looked at him one day, and this was like, what, 6 months after I wrote my book? And I said, I want to give a TED Talk one day. He's like, okay, do it, go for it. So I always had the application open on my computer for the big stage, but I never filled it out because of self-doubt, of like, what do I have to say that's worth sharing? What's my big idea that like deserves to be on the TED platform? But then, so I went on, that was an 8-month process of going back and forth. And then in February of 2019, I got an email from my company, saying that they're hosting the first ever TEDxOchsner, and they need speakers. And my first reaction was like, okay, this is my opportunity. I was like, let me apply. But I pulled up the application, and once again, self-doubt crept in. They're like, it's like, no, why would they pick you? What idea do you have worth sharing, et cetera, et cetera. So I was on the fence about if I should even I'll apply for it or not. And then a week or two, I think maybe like at most a week before applications were due, I had a chance encounter with the main organizer. And I gave him my pitch. He's like, I can't promise you anything, but go for it. So I applied, I made it, went through every round of interviews. At the end of every round, I was like, that wasn't my best, but at least I tried, and there's always next year. I got it. To my surprise, I got it. And so then I had about 2 months of just of like working on my talk, rehearsing it, editing it, yada yada yada. A long 2-month process. And then June 12th, the day came, and it was time for me to deliver my TED Talk. And how we talk about like looking back, you can see of where you are from where you've come from to where you are, and those landmark moments in your life. This is one of those for me, because this is like the most tangible sign of how far I've come on my journey so far. I was the very last speaker before lunch. So the entire morning I was a nervous wreck, like could not sit still, walking back and forth in the auditorium. It was just a mess. And then, so the first group went, we had a break, and then I went backstage to get mic'd up. Very long hours. I had 2 people in front of me and maybe like another video or whatever. So I had a good like 45-minute wait before it was my turn. So I'm pacing back and forth backstage, freaking out, trying to use every relaxation technique that I knew of to calm myself down. None of that was working. So finally, it was my turn. I walked out, took a deep breath, and told myself it's going to come out the way it's going to come out, and it's going to be okay. So it came out. I stuttered super hard for 4.5 minutes, but I walked off stage like extremely proud of myself for what I've done. And it would have been, and it showed me that like it's still a success, even though I stuttered my butt off for a good 4.5 minutes. Because younger me at 2021 would not have seen that as a success. He would have been mad because he stuttered so much in such an open forum. Whereas now I was like, I did the thing. Like I crossed off something off my bucket list. I stuttered, cool, whatever. Like I did the thing. And it was important for me because it showed me the importance of celebrating, small victories, which I'd been preached to me so many times, but I never listened to. But for me, that was like, okay, James, like you did this, regardless of the fact that you stuttered a lot. You did the thing, you accomplished this, and celebrate it. And I did. I hugged every single person, backstage, whether I knew you for months or like just met you. Like it was probably one of the proudest things I've ever done, and like one of the best days of my life. And then after all that, I just had to take a moment just to realize like where I was. Like 18-year-old me, no, we're not talking about stuttering. Like no way. 21-year-old me, maybe we can talk about stuttering to like certain people, but to like stutter in front of them, no, we're not. To stutter while talking about stuttering, no, we're not doing that. And at 26, I was like, I did the thing. I stuttered, okay, cool, but I did it. And in that moment, that day, it was me doing what I ultimately want to do, which is to be the person I needed when I was younger. And that was showing.
Doing what I really wanted to do. There's the line. That's what it's about. That's the goal. If we had to measure like how we doing with whatever, transcending stuttering, how we doing with life, how we play in the game. Jerry Seinfeld says in that interview, he says, if I drop dead tomorrow, I'd feel like I played the game well.
Right.
And we should all live life that way. Not that we should talk about leaving the world prematurely, but we should aim to live life well. And part of living life well is like grappling with the challenges, grappling with the ordeals, and how we respond, how we choose to respond. The fact you got on the stage, even if you looked at it as you tried and failed, you didn't fail to try. And I wonder if the younger self not only wouldn't tolerate the stuttering, but you've even gotten up there, would you even applied? So it's like, that's another thing just to realize, and I'll stop and go back to what you were saying, is like, I think people underrate the stuttering tax, or the tax that different things we pay. It's not only at the moment that we step on the stage, it's all the stages we haven't stepped on because of it. It's all the things we really want to do that we don't even allow ourselves to go. It's not the word we got stuck on, it's the word we didn't even dare say. It isn't the show that we flopped on the stage, it's the dance lessons that we always chose not to take because we knew one day there might be a recital. So whatever that is, if you feel find people, it goes back to the recipe I think James shared out. Find an experience that just fires you up. Find a community that continues to fortify that fire and fuel that fire and fan that flame. And then find those great mentors, those people who are going to open doors for you. It's a great recipe. But otherwise, it's like, we're all going to be running away from fear. We're all going to try to stay safe because it's a lot more comfortable to stay inside. It's a lot more comfortable to stay in the comfort zone. But as James said, we got to learn how to be comfortable with discomfort, because that's where the growth's at. That's where the good stuff is.
Yeah. So by doing that, it ultimately allowed me to be the person I needed when I was younger, which is someone who was going to stutter openly, talk about stuttering, and just didn't care and did it in a way that is confident and just like, this is part of who I am, and it's okay. Which I think that's ultimately what I do. What I do is to be that person I needed when I was younger, to be the person I needed when I was 10, the person I needed when I was 18, 21, etc. And I hope when I'm 40, I'm the person I needed, right now at like 28. I don't know who that person is that I need right now, but when I'm 40, I hope to be that person that I needed when I was 28.
Wow. Well, you got a lot of pages yet unwritten in this journey, but if we had to take a peek, what's in the bucket list, or what's in the 5-year dream for James Hayden?
5-year
It's your
dream?
birthday, so before you blow out the candles, we got to get your wish.
So I'll be 33 in 5 years. Wow.
Dude, that's not that old. I just want to say it's not that old.
I'll probably still look like I'm 16, but
God bless. You should still look like you're 17 when you're 55. Yeah.
So 5-year plan.
Wishes. What are you hoping to achieve? What are some of those bucket list items still in? Because you checked off the Facebook. You checked off writing a book. You checked off the TED Talk. I mean, what's left?
5 years. I'll be on Survivor. That's like up there for me. Although I would probably be like first one out, but just to say I did the thing would be cool. Maybe do another book at some point. Who knows? What else? What else? Some like big 5-year plans. I guess to do more, guest lecturing, to do that, and to maybe do some like internal development training of like, of like in like the corporate world of like, sharing my story and how do we treat others who are different than us, but also the power of embracing our vulnerabilities. We all have them. It's just that mine introduces itself before I could introduce myself to you. But to do something like that professionally, do that personally, maybe do a book, Survivor,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I have a bias. I'm not interested in seeing you on Survivor, but the rest of those is where I want to see you pouring in your time, because you can continue to make such an impact. It's been an amazing chat. Is there any wisdom that you would, this was the question Tim Ferriss asked Jerry Seinfeld at the end. So I won't regard myself as Tim Ferriss, but I will regard you as one of the greats out there. He said, if you had a banner or a bumper sticker or like some motto that you'd like to share with people that they could kind of take forward in their life and help them step forward in what they really want to be living, do you have like a little motto or a little bumper sticker or a little slogan that you would want to share?
There's a couple of them.
You can do more than one.
Okay. Embrace your vulnerabilities, and then own your stuff. And by that I mean like own your quirks, like own your failures, own your strengths, own the things that make you you, whether they're good or bad. Own them, because that's what makes you uniquely you, and be the person that you needed when you were younger. Those would be my big three.
The last one, be the person you needed when you were younger. Wow. I think words to live by. Yeah. I'm fired up. And I think the other thing that you very humbly share is like, be the person that you needed when you were younger for yourself. Give yourself the compassion, the understanding, the encouragement, the acknowledgement that you always wanted and needed and deserved. Yeah. But also through your book, James, and through conversations like this and stepping onto the TED Talk, you weren't just talking to yourself, you're talking to the world and you're paying it forward. So I think for all of us that have gone through and had privilege in our life, and for those of us that have had not the easiest go and didn't get a head start in life, if we make it, if we survive, Survivor, top right shoulder, got it. Yeah, if we survive, if we make it, we have an obligation to pay it forward so that other people behind us can get their turn. And so I think not only being the person you needed when you were younger, but through that experience, and as you said, part of the gift of grappling with and growing through challenge and difference is also that it reveals inside of us a certain sensitivity, a certain tuning in, and a certain muscle that we built for ourselves that we can also share with generosity and abundance with others. So I am gonna hang up here, but I'm like fired up. What can I pay forward? So thank you, James.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Drop your likes, your comments, your shares. Check out, there'll be playback on the blog. Check out Dear World, I Stutter. I believe there are a few left in stock. Amazon is restocking consistently, but Dear World, I Stutter, and it's one of the great books of personal honesty, openness, and just absolute insight. And as I suggested, there are different ways you could take it. You can learn more about James and learn more about James's story, but you could also take it as a prototype for your own book. Whether you ever publish it or not, you can just write letters to your younger self, write letters to the person that you never had a chance to answer back, write letters to the future self, to the future spouse, to the future kids. Amazing power in writing, and James has given us a great template to do that and to explore that and see the power of that. And on our blog, you can see the playback of this, and you can check out the podcast, Schneider Speech. It's Transcending Stuttering with Uri Schneider on all the podcasts. Subscribe, like, and again, we cannot have these conversations by ourselves. We need each other and we need a community. So thank you to you, James. Thank you, everybody who's listening. So
thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.